Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams Tea Podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And this week, we're coming at you with a brand new Now episode, where we talk about the goings-on of the world in music and art and entertainment. And we talk about what we have been listening to. And we present a special weekly topic this week, being an inverse of last week's topic, where we talked about bad albums from good artists. And this week, we're going to be talking about good albums from bad artists.
Yes, indeed. And we'll get into the finer points of that and what that discussion is going to look like later in the episode. So please stick around for that. Last week, we had a lot to talk about in terms of news and stuff because we had 2 weeks worth of things to catch up on. This week, it's been a bit quieter, so this will be a nice shorter episode, which is going to be a good thing, I think, because it means it'll be easier for me to edit. But the first thing I want to talk about in terms of music news, following up on something that we were quite excited about last week as well, which was the announcement of the new upcoming collaboration album between JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown, Scarin' the Hose, Volume 1. We were excited about that. We talked a little bit about how goofy and fun that title was. But just the day we record this, actually, we have an announcement of the album cover and the album track list as well.
Yes.
And I just want to take a moment to appreciate both of these things. First of all, the album cover itself, which is glorious. It's this kind of like blaxploitation style. It looks like a proper 70s poster for like a, Sweet Sweetback's Badass song or like a Foxy Brown movie or something like that. It just looks really fucking cool. JPEG Mafia with the gun and the Bible and the cross around his neck, just kind of prostrating himself, and then Danny Brown on the side with the pistol and the 12 gauge shotgun with the cops behind him. It just looks fucking awesome. The way the whole thing is like presented, like it's packaged in plastic like a vinyl record. It's just such a cool fucking cover. And this track list, all right, which I know you've already seen, Jake, but I want to just read. I just want to read it out loud as well for the benefits of our listeners at home as well, and so we can just kind of give a reaction. So we start with the title track, Scarin' the Hose. Again, fantastic. It's exactly what you want from both of these artists. The second song might be the funniest song title of the year so far, Step a Pig. Which is just amazing. I that's going to be banger of the year right there.
If they sample an audio clip from Peppa Pig in that, I'm going to die on the spot.
The third track, which was the song that you could hear in the Danny Brown's podcast that he showed a preview of last week, Lean Beef Patty, just makes me want a burger right now. The amazing Fentanyl Tester. Come on, man. Garbage Pail Kids. Perfect with an exclamation mark. Very, very JPEG Mafia title there. The amazing double-barreled Shut Your Bitch Ass Up / Muddy Waters, which is just amazing. Orange Juice Jones. Kingdom Hearts Key. God Loves You.
I just know Danny Brown's weeb ass put that on there just for shits and giggles.
There's no way they're both not incredibly huge anime nerds.
Oh yeah.
The incredible Run the Jewels. That's just the name of the song. I don't know if they're going to be on it. I hope they're not, because it would be funnier if they
it would absolutely be funnier if they just called it Run the Jewels.
Yeah. The one of the ones that I've seen most people talking about, Jack Harlow Combo Meal. Which,
Man, that just makes me think of the fact that, like, I always get breakfast from McDonald's when I come home from work. And the thing that baffles the shit out of me every time is when I see the Cardi B and Offset meal art on the menu for that. And I'm just like, what happened in civilization for us to get to this point?
Well, what does
this mean?
Whatever the Cardi B and Offset burger tastes like, it's gotta taste better than whatever the fucking Jack Harlow burger would taste like.
The Jack Harlow combo meal would be like a White Castle meal.
I don't know what that means. I'm sure it's funny. We have
the worst burger joint in America.
We have the track Ho, which is an acronym for Heaven on Earth, and then the immortal closing track, Where You Get Your Coke From. which, you know, this is going to be.
Yes.
I mean, I've heard rumors that the album might even be dropping this month, but not confirmed.
Oh,
Not confirmed.
please.
There have been Reddit rumors. I mean, we're relying on the hip hop and leak culture content, in their own words, Twitter account Kurko, to believe that this is even actually the real track list. So, you know, if it's not, I'll be bitterly disappointed.
Oh
But
yeah.
I on the off chance that it is, I wanted to take a moment to
It
acknowledge
it
these
feels
incredible songs.
too indicative of their sense of humor to not be. Like if a song called Jack Harlow Combo Meal does not make it on whatever this album is, I will be disappointed in both Peggy and Danny.
Yeah, I mean, if this is a fake track list, I can imagine them like
Flawless fake.
I can imagine them scrambling now to actually try and make these songs. Like, if this isn't real. Amazing, amazing work as always. I want to shout out as well that something incredibly cool that was announced this week is that Sufjan Stevens' modern classic Illinois is being adapted into a theatrical dance performance. So we're getting a stage version of
That's
Illinois.
cool.
And I don't know if I'm allowed to reveal this, so I'm not going to say who, but one of our close friends may be involved in the crew working on this as well.
No
So
shit.
I'm just looking at the Stereogum comments. I'm struggling to imagine John Wayne Gacy Jr. set to a dance routine.
Or
Um,
fucking the predatory wasp of the Palisades and
I,
dance.
I can imagine that being just like this massive, you know, gay romp because of how emotional that song is. But who's gonna want to choreograph Casimir Pulaski Day? Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, Jesus Christ, I can't wait to dance to a song about my best friends getting cancer. Jesus Christ.
anyway, on the topic of gay rights as well, I just want to shout out that there is an upcoming concert that's being played later this month in Tennessee called Love Rising, or the Love Rising Benefit,
Yes.
as a charity concert. And you may not just obviously you may be interested in this purely for the fact that it is a charity concert for benefiting the Tennessee Equality Project, Inclusion Tennessee, and a bunch of other organizations that help queer people, but also the fact that Hayley Williams, Jason Isbell, Julian Baker, Amanda Shires, Hosier, Sheryl Crow, Yola are all playing this concert, including many other artists as well. Brittany Harold is playing too. So if you're going to be remotely in the Nashville area on the 20th of March, consider going along to see these amazing artists and, of course, to support such a fantastic cause as well. Obviously, this is not, you know, I live in New Zealand, so I never get to see or be a part of any of these things, but I just think this is really, really fucking awesome. I think it's cool that all these artists have agreed to be a part of it as well. And so I wanted to give a shout out to it because I think that
Things in
cool.
Tennessee have been recently on the law side of the world. Things are especially bad for queer people there right now. So I really do respect everyone who's taking part in this.
Yeah.
So get go check that shit out if you can.
Absolutely. That's all I have in the way of music news this week.
I've got two things that I might
Please.
want to shout out.
Go ahead.
First of all is that new album announcement and confirmed release date for one of my favorite modern rappers, McKinley, Dixon. His new album he's been building up to. He's been releasing singles over the last couple of months, all of which are amazing, and I'm happy that they're all making it on the record. The new album, Beloved, Paradise, Jazz, which is the title, punctuation and all, is coming out on the 2nd of June. We'll be sure to cover that, considering how much I love For My Mama and Anyone Who Look Like Her, which is in right now as my favorite hip-hop album of the decade, and I'm super duper excited to be able to cover this. Also, we don't have a specific release date for it, but we do have confirmation that at least one of the two finished Panopticon albums is coming out this year. We got album art for it. The new reissue of his album Kentucky, which came out in 2012, is now available to purchase on Bandcamp. That's a great great album. I don't think we've ever talked about that record on here, but it is like one of the first properly great Panopticon albums. So if you are a fan of him, if you are a fan of his discography, go check that out. And we are super excited to cover who got our 2021 album of the year.
Absolutely. The new album is called The Rhyme of Memory, I believe, and it looks set to be another opus from Austin. So really can't wait. Of course, you can follow us for any updates and news, or follow obviously Austin's Bandcamp because he posts prolifically. I know you and I both get notifications because we're followers of his Bandcamp. But we will make sure to relay the news as it relates to that as well. If there are a handful of artists that feel as though they're not just podcore, but where we feel as though we are an actual source of news for them. And
I am the moderator of the Panopticon subreddit, for what it's worth.
Well, that's just genuinely fucking awesome. So my announcements as well do relate to new singles and album announcements too. First thing I want to shout out as well, very exciting. I was not expecting this because I thought that their last album was going to be their final record, because around the time that it came out, the frontman of this band, and the band of course in question being Protomartyr, frontman Joe Casey, around the time of the last Protomartyr record, Ultimate Success Today, I just remember it was one of the most memorable experiences reading an interview with an artist, because it just was one of the most depressing interviews I'd ever read. Joe Casey was like convinced that he was going to be dead within a year or two because of the way that his life was going, and he was absolutely certain that Ultimate Success Today would be the final Protomartyr record, because he couldn't conceive of a situation where they would be able to afford to make another album. It's really hard out there for artists now, but amazingly, obviously the tides have turned, and Protomartyr are delivering us a new record actually on the same day as the McKinley Dixon album. 2nd of June, the new album is going to be called Formal Growth in the Desert, and I'm particularly excited about this because the lead single and opening track, Make Way, is fucking fantastic. Like, Protomartyr are
so
back,
good,
and they're completely, they still sound like Protomartyr, but they're giving a new twist to their sound, which is the addition of this twangy spaghetti western guitar, which completely adds this additional flavor to the band that I completely love. Joe Casey's presence and performance is as animated as ever. The song itself is fantastic. It feels as though it's going to lead right into the second track on the record as well. So it's going to be another one of my favorite things about Protomartyr albums, is that they're very easy to listen to from front to back, because the songs more often than not just run into each other. In fact, I revisited their best album, Relatives in Descent, this week. It was the first thing I listened to when I bought my new AirPods, frankly, funnily enough. And that album still holds up. I love that album every bit as much as I did the first time I heard it. So really excited for a new Protomartyr. New single was great. Check it out if you haven't. Fantastic. We got a new single from Indigo D'Souza as well, Smog, the second single in anticipation of her new album, All of This Will End, which I'm pretty sure is coming out on the 28th of April, same day as the new national album, I believe. It's another great Indigo D'Souza song. I mean, the lead single...
for indie music.
Yeah, the lead single that she released, the first song she released, Younger and Dumber, I thought was one of her best songs she'd ever put out. This is another great track. The album the album's looking set, frankly, to maybe even exceed her last record, Any Shape You Take, which we both are huge fans of. So
adore that album. Check
this out. Really, really highly anticipating what Indigo does next, and looking forward to the full album. It's a great song. Also want to shout out as well that as we record this, Manchester Orchestra have a new EP / mini album / virtual reality film out. It's kind of a multimedia thing that they've been working on called The Valley of Vision. It's too short to be an album, but kind of too long to be an EP. I think it's like 7 or 8 tracks. And it's coming, with this fully fledged visual accompaniment that involves VR in some way, I believe. I haven't completely dug fully into it, but they did release a lead single, The Way, in anticipation of this project, which is another very atmospheric but beautifully produced Manchester Orchestra song. Feels very slick, feels very modern, and the way that their last couple of records have been really hitting as well, but has that kind of slow build to a huge finale that a lot of their best work has too. So check that out. I'll probably get a chance to listen to the project in full and then report on it this time next week. But if you weren't aware of it, check it out. Great to have more Manchester Orchestra as well.
Yeah,
Shaping
I'll be
up to
listening to
another.
this tonight just because, again, always a big day for indie music whenever they drop something.
Absolutely. I also want to shout out as well an artist releasing a new song, an artist that we've covered in our discography breakdown series. The Antlers put out a new song this week. I Was Not There. It appears to be a sort of follow-up to the full band version of the Peter Silberman solo song Ahimsa that they delivered last year. The new song's called I Was Not There. It's beautiful. It very much follows in the tradition of their most recent album, Green to Gold, which, by the way, still holds up. I think that album's really underrated. Every excuse I get to talk about the fact that that album exists, I take that opportunity because it's really, really good. And if you enjoyed the more laid back and outwardly beautiful approach of that record, you will enjoy this new song. It is gorgeous. Peter Silberman's voice is fragile and hollow, but beautiful. It has magical atmosphere, and it's another great Antlers track. So check it out. We're always going to fly the flag for those guys, especially as they continue to evolve and move into this more plaintive direction compared to their most famous music. The Menzingers put out a new song this week, Bad Actors, which, you know, before I listened to it, I was already just going, bad actors, weren't we, darling?
Aren't we, darling? Always slipping out before communion started.
But this is not a rewrite of Bad Catholics from After the Party. This is, of course, a new song in its own right. It's actually a leftover from Hello Exile, but you wouldn't know it because this feels like an earlier era Menzingers song. It's really fulsome. It has this massive sound that I associate with records like Rented World and After the Party especially, and it's fantastic. I mean, it's got everything you'd want from a Menzingers song. Fantastic chorus, fantastic energy. I'm ready for a new Menzingers album, baby. I know that I wasn't hugely into the last album they put out, but there's still plenty of reasons to love the Menzingers. It's still awesome to have them around. I want a new Menzingers album more than I want a lot of things. So please deliver whenever you can, boys. Would really appreciate it.
It's been 4 years.
But the last thing I want to talk about, the last song I want to shout out is my song of the year. Just completely bowled me over. And the first time I heard it, I was impressed. Second time I heard it, I was in love. And the third time I heard it, I was convinced this is the best song of the year so far. And the cool thing about it is it's a band that I had never heard of. And that was recommended to me by Stephen Hayden tweeting about this band. And then I think Jason Isbell maybe retweeted it or also shouted the song out as well. And those two things, either of them in isolation would have been enough. But together, I was like, okay, whatever this is, I have to hear it. The band is called Rat Boys. And the song is called Black Earth, Wisconsin. And here's how I will pitch this song to you. It's a what if great grandpa made a war on drugs song? That's what this is. The band actually sound uncannily like great grandpa. Like the front woman has that very similar singing voice. And for the first 2 minutes, I was like, oh, fuck yes. This is this beautiful, gorgeous slice of that twangy but emotional Americana that reminded me so much of what we loved about Four of Arrows, you know, the album that basically kickstarted our friendship, Jake. And then the song does this incredible thing, which, by the way, it's an 8-minute song, right? Which is already a tantalizing prospect for an Americana folk song. 2 minutes, first 2 minutes, you get this really strong, really captivating, fantastic vocal performance, really great structure. Remind me a lot of some of the singles from the new Wednesday album, which is coming out, I think, in a week or two. Really excited to talk about that because they're another similarly great band. But then the song does something crazy. It's not that crazy, but it is kind of crazy. It's an 8-minute song, and about 2 minutes in, you get a guitar solo. And it's gorgeous. This is where the song starts reminding me of War on Drugs, because it's this gorgeous, kind of languorous, ringing guitar solo that goes basically all over the map. A little bit War on Drugs, a little bit Two Hands era Big Thief. Just beautiful guitar tones, just completely giving you this emotive journey. And it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it keeps going. And it's a 4-minute guitar solo in this 8-minute song. And it is incredible. And by the time you get to the end of it, there are these choral vocals that have come in that are basically doing like a Hey Jude-esque climax. The song just builds and builds and builds. And then the final stretch, it comes down from that, but only by necessity because it has gotten to such amazing heights by that point. I have listened to the song every day since I first heard it, many times a day in the last couple of days as well. This song is incredible. It's my song of the year. I've never heard of this band. I have never, their previous records don't seem to have really any hype surrounding them. I've never really heard of them be publicized before, but a lot of music critics are talking about this song. People I respect are talking about the song, and I can see why. It's incredible. I hope that it's a sign of a new record as well, because I want to hear more from these guys in this mode. Maybe I do need to go revisit their previous material. Who knows? All I know is this song is incredible, and I want to shout about it from the rooftops to anyone who finds the prospect of this band interesting, because it is breathtaking. Amazing, amazing, amazing song. So that's all I have in the way of new music as well. So for this point, I'll throw over to you, Jake. I want to hear from you. What have you been listening to in the last week that you want to shout out, that you found really, really interesting and you think deserves more attention?
Well, I will start off with talking about newer releases. And I have listened to a fair few. One of which being I listened to the new Ulthar album, or well, I guess technically one of the new Ulthar albums. This is a death metal band from Oakland, California, and they have a pretty respectable catalog of music thus far. But what caught my attention is that they released not just one, but two records this year so far, and both of them are on the Rate Your Music chart. So I was like, okay, this sounds interesting, and so I listened to the first of the two albums, which is Anthronomicon, and this is really muscular death and progressive metal. If you are into, again, the band Death, if you're into their sort of Human and Onward era, this is right up your alley. The album didn't really do a lot for me personally. I chalk that down to two things. One, I listen to a lot of prog metal and a lot of progressive death metal, so not to say I have like a higher standard. I've heard a lot of it. So sometimes if you're just, doing more meat and potato stuff with this genre, it doesn't leave as much of a lasting impression on me. But everything in here is good. The band is really in sync with one another. They actually have a really great knack for like metal riffs and like hook writing, which is not always common. These mixes are really clear. You can hear everything very well. It's very polished, but it doesn't entirely abandon the grid. It's not like a Melodeath album or something. But if you want some very good basics like death metal, highly recommend this. I listened to a little bit of the other album, which is like the one I listened to is very like normal in structure, but the other one is 2 songs, even though it's like just as long. And I listened to a little bit of the first one, and I liked what I heard, but it wasn't really enough to hook me completely. But still, metal nerds, get on those if you haven't. All right, so very infrequently, someone will send music to the podcast. This does not happen very often, but I always love when it does. A, because it strokes my ego a little bit and it just makes me feel nice. Just because apparently we're important enough to have people send us music, which I'm trying not to get a big head about. It's just kind of cool. But sometimes it's a little bit like it's clearly like an independent artist who's just starting out. Sometimes it's, just like a single or something. Rarely ever is it like a full bona fide project. But I got an email this week from somebody who it's either their manager or someone in the band, but basically they sent me their debut record and said that the reason that they did is because the Cloakroom album, Dissolution Wave, made it onto our best overlooked albums of the year last year. And that was the video that they specifically referenced, which means they watched into that video long enough for me to talk about Cloakroom. So I felt really, really privileged to have people pay attention to my opinion like that, especially on such an overlooked album. And they were like, we're a band that is kind of in the same vein as something like Cloakroom. So we figured we might as well send it in. And this is an album from the band Team Tremolo, which I love that name. It's so fantastic.
That's the most shoegaze band name generator thing I've ever heard. And I mean that in a positive way. Team Tremolo.
No, absolutely. I mean, like they have that, and they also have their like both their album and EP that they've released, which is the only two things they've released, are very much like it's like an early My Bloody Valentine cover and like an early All Say cover.
I was gonna say, like, if there's a Team Tremolo, I want to hear a different team for every My Bloody Valentine EP. I want a Team Glider. I want a team You Made Me Realize. I want
Please.
all the teams.
Me
And they
as
have to
well,
fight.
honestly. I don't necessarily want them to fight, but the reason I wanted to shout this out above and beyond the fact that they reached out to me is because I listened to this. This blew me away. Oh man, this is fantastic. I don't know what I was expecting. I guess the only frame of reference I had was something like Dissolution Wave. And it certainly is in that same vein, and that I would say it's overall it is a melding of shoegaze and post-hardcore, except the post-hardcore is like way more felt on this than it was on the Cloakroom album. So it's a pretty even split. There are moments on here where I was legitimately reminded of stuff like Deftones. But the thing is that the sound here is so unique, is that not only does it have those two things, but there's plenty of indie rock in here. Great Grandpa were a band I kept thinking of multiple times, especially with the lead vocalist who, wow, holy shit. This band's lead vocalist, Jenny Wood, is sensational. She sounds a lot like, imagine what you would get if you fused Chelsea Wolfe and Phoebe Bridgers together, but added a particular oomph that those performers don't often utilize in their specific albums or songs. And then you get this. And I loved this front to back, honestly. Like, I was not prepared for it. In fact, I'm always a little wary of listening to stuff like this, especially if someone sends it to us, because, if I'm not really that hot on it, or if I'm just kind of lukewarm, I'll just be like, I feel bad that I can't more enthusiastically recommend this. But I 100% can with this album, and I need to. It's a moral imperative that I need to, because I mean, this band has 2 ratings on Rate Your Music, and I'm one of them. That's insane to me. The disparity between this band's, at least from my account, their perceived popularity and their skill it's genuinely nauseating. There's the moment I knew that this was going to be an album that was going to be special and that I needed to shout out is right after the first song, Beneath, which is a really arresting opener. There's a seamless transition into the next song, and I was like, ooh, oh, okay, all right. We're getting a little ambitious here. We're working with some shit. I don't know how this band, with as little popularity as they have, led them to be able to produce something that sounds this warm and ethereal feeling, but man, they really do. And not to mention the vocal presence. Like, a lot of the times it's really difficult to kind of pay attention to shoegaze vocals and the lyricism in shoegaze songs, but here there's a perfect blend where you can always hear the lead singer, and there's some really emotionally evocative writing on here. I was really taken off guard. If anything, you have to listen to the song midway through this album, Shudder. It legitimately, this song is so good it pissed me off that it isn't like a single that people can talk about. Because if this band were to have a single from this album, which I don't believe that they do, this would have to be it. This is one of the best songs of the year, no cap. It's phenomenal. It's one of the more indie rock inclined songs on the record, so I think it's a little bit more accessible to maybe people who don't immediately gravitate towards the admittedly enticing combination of post-hardcore and shoegaze. But this is just a band that have no business being this in sync, this synergistic, and just this consistently amazing. I need more music from these guys, and I need them to get more attention. I'm not sure if they have a Bandcamp. Let me actually look that up
They do.
really
They do.
quick here. Okay,
too.
well, we'll link the Bandcamp in the description below. Go check them out. They are more than worth it. I am legitimately going to be listening to a lot more of this as the year goes on, because not only is this an album I could foresee being in like our whatever our overlooked albums video might be, but I could see this ending up in like the upper echelons of my favorites list. This is so fantastic, and I was so like it's rare that I'm this surprised by an album these days, just because even in albums I love, when I go into them, the internet makes it so that you feel like you know so much about a record before you already go into it. You know what genres it has, you know, rate your music tags, all that kind of stuff. You get what you think you might get when you see it on the tin. This, on the other hand, just feels like it came from a bolt out of the blue, and I loved it. Right, that's it for new releases. But in terms of what I have been listening to, just on a more freeform level, I've been listening to a lot of Sleater-Kinney these past 2 weeks, because the first two Sleater-Kinney albums I heard the first one was No Cities to Love, which I really liked, but gave me a really different impression of what this band was in hindsight, just because the first two albums I heard from them were that and is it The Center Won't Hold? Is that
that's the
second
one,
to most
the
recent?
one after that, yes.
Okay, those were the first two albums I heard from them, and I knew the whole thing about Janet Weiss leaving after that album, and I knew that people didn't really care for. I think that album's okay. In all
It's not a
honesty, I
bad
don't really.
record. It's fine.
Yeah, it has a terrible song on it, but I think the album overall is pretty good. I love how you know exactly what song I'm talking about too. But I didn't listen to the most recent one. But a little bit before the podcast started, I remember listening to The Woods. I think at your recommendation,
Yeah,
and that is a very different album from those other two records. I feel like they're a little bit more just generally indie rock inclined in their later career, whereas The Woods is like, you know, a loud Fridman produced rock album. And I think that sort of, it made me have like a paradigm shift into what I understood in regards to this band. And I didn't really know that was just what the vast majority of their career sounds like. And it's been forever since I've listened to that. It's been more than 3 years at this point. So I was like, you know, I need to go explore this band a little bit more. I remembered you talking about one of their songs on our favorite guitar solos video, and that song was amazing, and I was like, I just need to listen to these, because you take a look at their run of records from 96 to 2005. This has got to be one of the best streaks of indie rock records in the history of fucking music. Like these girls had some shit going on. So I decided, okay, I'm going to listen to another one of their highly acclaimed albums and see if this one hooks me. So I listened to Dig Me Out. And loved Dig Me Out. This is an amazing album. Love the shit out of it. The song that you talked about, One More Hour, is on here. It is amazing. But that's not even the best song on here by my estimation. There's the title track is amazing. Turn It On is one of the best songs I've heard this year. Dance Song 97 is a fucking rager. The closer Jenny is amazing. This whole album, this is 36 minutes of pure badass punk rock shit, and it's awesome. I think that was what the key was for me to understanding this band, is that Sleater-Kinney are a punk band. I never really put that together in my head, but it's just like they have that sort of Riot Girl punk energy. And I think the most alluring thing about the band, especially on Dig Me Out, is just the vocals of Carrie Brownstein. My God, this woman can sing. Every single syllable sounds so vital with her, and the way she's able to sort of ride the line between genuine, really great, tightly constructed melodies and just kind of bellowing and occasionally fucking screaming. It's addictive to listen to. And these albums are always so short that they last for the perfect amount of time. They're really noisy, really raucous, really scrappy, but they're always thoughtful. And that's what got me about Dig Me Out, which honestly, I'm probably even underrating as much as I love it. But that one, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go back. I'm going to start from the beginning. So I listened to the Sleater-Kinney self-titled, which is a good album. I would say it's certainly it's certainly the first album from an indie rock band. It's got its moments that just sort of feel very skeletal, very bare bones, but this does have its fair share of highlights, including the closer, the last song, which is honestly one of my favorite Sleater-Kinney songs, because this song is fucking terrifying. Brownstein, when I say this woman can scream, holy shit, this is traumatizing. It is an incredible track. I also really loved songs like The Day I Went Away, for instance, but it is very much a boilerplate record for them. I got the impression. But I did also listen to Call the Doctor, which I think is an improvement in basically every way. I really love just the whole, everything about the song construction is just a little bit more vital. It's a little bit more immediate. It's obviously a bit louder. Everyone feels like they're more in, lockstep with one another. And the hooks on here are just, again, relentless. Good Things, one of my favorite Sleater-Kinney songs so far. I love the hook on I Want to Be Your Joey Ramone. But they elaborate on that hook and they say, I want to be your is it Thurston Moore? I think it's Thurston Moore on the second iteration of that hook, which is just like, yeah, these girls definitely listened to some Sonic Youth in their day.
Well,
These
also that's
gay
just
motherfuckers.
that's the sort of thing you would only say in like no later than 1996. Like you wouldn't
exactly. And I feel like I got into Sonic Youth just in time to be able to be like, oh, hey, I understood that reference. But I really enjoyed how much of an arc is between these three records, just because there's a really satisfying progression. They really do just sort of get better and better. And I'm really looking forward to the run of records between 1999's The Hot Rock and revisiting 2005's The Woods. I'm really way more into this band than I would have initially expected. And a lot of it has to do with just the immediacy, the tightness of the song construction, how deceptively simple all of these instrumental ideas are, and what a distinct sort of, I mean, for lack of a more subtle or nuanced set of words, a lot of gay punk feminist shit. It's kind of like if Pup was front, like that kind of snotty brattiness that's in a band like that, but channeled through a more kind of righteous indignation that I really enjoy the fire of the band, really.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, they're a fairly fundamentally simple band, but so much of what appeals to Sleater-Kinney about me and always has, I mean, I've been a fan of them since I was a teenager, is the dueling personalities of Corin Tucker and Carrie Brownstein, because they trade off on vocals as well. They both sing about an equal amount of the time, and you have Corin's kind of slightly more shrill and abrasive yelp, which I think is one of my favorite vocal styles ever, versus Carrie's kind of more full-throated singing style and her propensity to really kind of lean into those screams that she can do, but also just the fact that these two are dueling vocals and dueling guitars as well. Like they both contribute equally to the guitar playing and the singing, and there's this fiery energy between them. I mean, there's a reason why One More Hour is my favorite song of theirs, and it was in the Greatest Breakup Songs video we did that I talked about it, because it was a song that talked about their relationship and, the story behind a connection that they shared, that, the fact that they were together behind the scenes for a while and it didn't work out, but they remained committed to the band. And there's so much emotion in that. But no, Sleater-Kinney have one of the most consistently excellent discographies ever. I mean, right up to The Woods. I mean, I think their post-reunion stuff, most of it doesn't work for me as well. No Cities to Love is definitely the closest to their classic sound. But even that record feels as though it lacks a certain level of weight and dynamism that their classic era records have. I know a lot of people love that album though, so I don't begrudge them that at all. But yeah, the seminal run, like their first 7 records it's an incredible stretch of music. And I mean, Dig Me Out, I think, is the most definitive Sleater-Kinney album. It's the most representative of what they are and what they sound like and who they are. It is, I think, their best album as well. Although I have a very strong love for The Woods, and I'm very curious to see how that album will play when you get to it after running their
Me too.
records through in sequence, because you've encountered them in a very strange way.
Yeah, I
Slowly
have.
working backwards from their more recent stuff. So I mean, you're about to hit. I mean, you've already hit really like the golden run. But the Hot Rock, All Hands on the Bad One Beat as well, which is just a phenomenally beautiful album that doesn't lose any of the raw energy or melody of what they can do, but brings in so much more dynamism to their sound. Then setting up the sludge punk garage metal of the Woods, which is, you know, one of the most badass albums ever
Badass.
made. Yeah, it's just a complete riot, and I never ever get tired of that album. They're definitely on the short list of artists for me to do worst to best every album ranked videos on, because I think there'd be a really interesting and very
Yeah.
easy band for me to talk about in that format. But yeah, I'm really excited that you're getting into them, because it makes a lot of sense to me that you would like them a lot. And especially once you get Dig Me Out as well, because that just is the Sleater-Kinney album, then I think the rest of their music kind of does just unfurl and unfold and start to make a lot of sense. It's, yeah, they're an amazing band. And even though I think that their more recent material just doesn't do it for me, I'm glad they're still around. It's not really Sleater-Kinney without Janet Weiss. I think that the most
Yeah.
recent album really proved that. She is one of my favorite drummers of all time, like
She's
top
so
5.
good.
The energy and the ferocity of her playing is incredible, and you hear that on basically every album that she's on. So just a phenomenal band. I'm so glad you're really they're really starting to click with you.
And perhaps on the complete opposite end of the musical spectrum, oh boy, this is embarrassing. If you're a fan of the YouTube channel Mike the Snare, which you should be because he's great, full endorsement from this podcast of Mr. the Snare. I watch his videos all the time, and one of his most recent videos, he's doing like a sort of how to get into genres. He started out with metal, and his second video was how to get into K-pop. And you know, I was just like, this is a world of music that I know nothing about. Like, just nothing. And not that it's ever like allured me in any way or even really like put me off, but it's just like I do feel a kind of lack of musical literacy knowing that like this is such a big thing right now
And
that
especially because
I
we do a
just,
music podcast every week where we
well,
try to be as varied as possible. There's only so long you can
exactly.
deliberately ignore things before you start to feel as though you're actually robbing yourself.
And I don't mean to like demean the genre about by saying that. I'm just saying that from a Western perspective, this is just a genre that has a certain stigma because of its fan base being not even like annoying, just like rabid to the point of like being cyber criminals. But like it's also something that's like, you know, I like fun bubblegum pop and hyper pop shit. There's no reason that I have that I like. I would just be like, oh, this just won't be for me. So I took Mr. The Snare's advice, and what I listened to this week is the album Max and Match from LOONA. Stan LOONA. You know that meme? Which is interesting just because I learned a little bit about the way K-pop groups work, in that this album from this band is technically not like LOONA, the idol collective. This is a subgroup. And what happens a lot of the time in Korean pop music is that they'll have, you know, a collective of artists, and then they'll have various subgroups that will release music based on what role they play. And this is the group Odd Eye Circle, which is like one of the more beloved ones. And I was kind of shocked to see how highly rated this album was. I like, again, this is like got like rate your music 3.1 written all over it, and come to discover that it's like a bolded record that's like the highest K-pop release ever made. I was just like, okay, I'll check this out. It's 25 minutes. This is really good. I really enjoyed all of this, honestly. If you really like I would say the two biggest points of inspiration are Carly Rae Jepsen and Ariana Grande, particularly Ariana Grande. That's sort of more modern, contemporary R&B infused pop music. It occasionally gets a lot bigger and brighter. The song "Sweet Crazy Love" has gone on my permanent rotation playlist because this is an amazing song. The production on this whole album is so airtight, and I can see why, like, it could be polished to the point of alienation, but when we live in a world of hyperpop and music that kind of takes that aesthetic to its logical extreme, this doesn't really feel like it's that alien anymore. So listening to this was, I mean, it was basically like no different than when I went and listened to Sheena Ringo for the first time, even though that's obviously a very, very different aesthetic. But all of these songs are really great, really enjoyable stuff. The amazingly titled "Lunatic," but spelled with the name.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, it's good thinking there. Good song, great song even. Girlfront, another great song. The closer Odd Front is amazing. I just maybe we can, destigmatize a little bit of this, just because I can see a lot of the, music circles we run in turning their nose up at stuff like this. But there's obviously a lot of thought and construction put into this stuff, and I had a delightful time with it. And check it out, because it's not even that long, like, at all. I would highly recommend it. And there are plenty of other EPs and records that I want to listen to that are in this area of music. Though I think it's interesting that a lot of the time albums aren't really considered the proper format for bands like this. Like, that's just kind of a way of compiling the singles. Like, it's all about the culture of, like, the sort of immediate consumption, the sort of performances, the videos, the music videos, the, like, that kind of stuff is a little bit more at the forefront. So there's not a lot of, like, grand unity or anything here, but it feels like they still know that these will be consumed as entire packages. And again, as a 25-minute long experience, it was super fun. I had a great time with it. So if you're in a mood where your fragile masculinity isn't affecting your ability to consume art, then give it a shot. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, we like I haven't listened to much K-pop, but we got to destigmatize this. Like, we've got to, like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't feel like you have to get ahead of, explaining that that you really
Exactly.
enjoyed this. It's just so stupid that exists. Like, I like, you and I both already like a lot of music that's way gayer than this shit. So there's no need to have an extra level of, hey, indulge me here, guys, because it's also kind of low key. There's a little bit of ingrained racism there.
Totally.
We don't have to dig into, but yeah, I think it's awesome, and it makes me want to really listen to it as well. So I'm definitely going to check it out. All right, I don't have any new or exciting listens from this week. I've basically just been spinning stuff that I already love, listening to a lot of Ocean Size. Connor and I are slowly gearing up to do a video on their discography. I've been spinning that new Young Fathers album and a lot recently this week. Just listening to a lot of great music that much of which we have already talked about. So without further ado, let's get into our main discussion today, which is the inverse of what we did last week. Last week on our Now episode, we talked about bad albums from great artists. We talked about artists that we love, and we investigated instances where things just went wrong, where they didn't quite lean into their strengths, or they did something that mystified in a way that was more regrettable than interesting. And because that was focused around negativity, it was a fun discussion, but it was focused around negativity. So I wanted to flip the script this week and do the exact inverse, which is also, I think, you hear a lot. It's very easy to find, like, publications or magazines or whatever who have talked about, when great artists mess it up or whatever. But I feel like the inverse is talked about even less, when artists who don't have a lot of critical acclaim, or who just don't work a lot of the time, or who make music that people don't really like, suddenly find an energy that works. And so I thought, let's probe this a little bit. It's a little bit of a tougher topic to think of examples for, so we're only going to do 2 each. But we want to talk about artists that we didn't like, or artists that don't work for us, except for one instance, except for one core moment where it all just kind of hangs together and clicks. we also wanted to make sure that it wasn't just the debut album, because we don't want to talk about artists who just fell off. We want to talk about artists who were bad and then suddenly found a way to make it work for us and maybe haven't captured that since, or variations on that theme. Right, so moments where artists find a way to make it work, and that is the exception rather than the rule. So yeah, really finding an excuse to say something nice about artists that maybe we might be more inclined to diss or speak negatively about. So we've both come up with 2 examples here that we're going to talk about. For instance, what we think about the artist, why we don't like the artist generally, and why this record that we've chosen, why it works for us, where the others fail. So Jake, what is your first pick today?
Okay, so I need to emphasize how difficult of a topic this ended up being for me, to the point where I scrolled through all 2,600 of my Rate Your Music ratings just to find things that were even applicable to this, because, you know, for as wide a variety of music we consume, we tend to veer towards things that we are interested in and think will be good. So it's not a lot of the time where we even have the precedent for an artist that's like has a career that's bad enough for us to be surprised, because a lot of the time you just lack context. And there are many instances where we've covered albums in the past that could have been applicable to this very concept. And that was very nearly the case with my first pick here, which is the artist Iman. Now,
Who?
This exactly. Who indeed. This is interesting because this was very nearly a record club for us last week, and the only or last year, and the only reason it wasn't is because 3 weeks in a row nobody wanted to listen to it. So I just took it off and figured, fuck it. Because I put up his debut album, I Don't Want You Back. And the entire reason was because this guy sucks. Nobody remembers him, and he's like a one-hit wonder status. And really, I just wanted to pick a good, for some record clubs, we pick them based on how much we like them, how much interesting they will be to talk about. And sometimes we just pick awful fucking garbage to talk about.
What kind of artist is Eamon for our listeners at home?
Oh, he is a pop rapper. Kind of blends a bit of R&B in there too, specifically on his most famous song, which is oh goodness, Fuck It, I Don't Want You Back. Which is hilarious.
I remember listening to this song. I didn't listen to the album, I listened to this song.
This song is about Iman having relationship woes. The girl in the relationship leaves him and cheats on him, and then she tries to come back, and it's this just hilariously misogynistic sort of power fantasy of rejecting the girl who did you wrong. And it's just this nasal voiced, whiny fucking like South Side D'Angelo ripoff shit. And it just sounds terrible. Like, it's so dated sounding. And not to give you a bit of a picture on the oeuvre of Mr. Iman, is that not only is that the highest rated song on this album by a significant margin, and it is a terrible fucking song, he also has songs like I Love Them Hoes, Get Off My Dick, 4, the number 4, The Rest of Your Life, I'd Rather Fuck With You, and Low Rida, but with an A, not an ER.
Like flow, but lose the F.
Yes.
And it's worth noting as well, these are songs, this is 2004, his debut album came out. This was the peak trashy rap era, and this guy is the whitest of the white. Like, this guy is, he couldn't be more white unless he was an albino. Like, this is what we're talking here. Doing shit like I Love Them Hoes and Girl Act Right, all that kind of bullshit.
And just for the sake of it, I listened to select tracks off of his following albums. Not all of them, just because I don't hate myself that much. But there are songs on things like his second album, Love and Pain, which I think is hysterical because he looks like a bit of a dressed up Drake on this album cover. But there are songs on here like I love fucking parenthetical when I call, and ho wop parenthetical hold up.
I'm a big fan of how could you bring him home?
It's bad, and not to mention those albums were in 2004 and 2006, and he came back in 2017 with an album called the Golden Rail Motel, which isn't looked upon that well by people, even though it seems to be an improvement on his first stuff. I listened to a little bit of You and Only You, which is just a sickeningly saccharine kind of sugary pop rap thing. It's a little jazzy, but it's not remarkable at all. And he followed it up with an album called Captive Thoughts in 2019, which is similarly unremarkable and is also 17 minutes.
Oh dear.
Ouch. And
Oh
then
dear.
we have last year's album, No Matter the Season. And this was interesting just because the entire reason I listened to this album was, in fact, because we were going to do this record club. So I went to his little Apple Music page and then saw that he had a new album out. And I was like, this guy still makes music? What the fuck? What the hell? And I was like, this is interesting. And I took a look at it and it was, 30 odd minutes or something like that. And I was like, this isn't that long. I'll give this a shot. I got a car ride to go on. This will take up some time. And this album's really good. It has a lot to do with the fact that it is nothing like his previous music. Just absolutely fucking nothing like it. It's very like funk and soul infused. I would describe it as very much a modern take, like a contemporary R&B take on like Marvin Gaye. And obviously doesn't have the instrumental bravura, the incredible vocals, and it is not quite as thought-provoking as Mr. Marvin Gaye, but front to back, this is really great. Honestly, a lot of it has to do with the fact that, yeah, the instrumentals on here are really full sounding, kind of jazz infused funk. A lot of them sound really big, kind of epic, but a lot of it has to do with Iman himself, which I think is what made this an interesting sort of pick for this, is because he leans away from his nasally rapping cadence and just goes into full on singing on here. And it's really good. It's really like deep, full-throated stuff. I mean, like if you told me that this was a different guy than the other albums, I'd straight up fucking believe you. And he adds a kind of passion. And there's a lot of, topical stuff on this record that really does feel actually like an earnest and emotional. And a lot of it speaks to, the scene that this music was came out from. And, you just get the feeling that Iman has a particular reverence for the music that he's making, so much so that it maybe limits his creativity to the point where I wouldn't say that there's anything that makes this album particularly remarkable or anything. It's very much indebted to its influences, but the degree to which it is indebted to its influences and competently performed and well made and assembled and just front to back enjoyable, there's some solid bangers on here. I'd honestly recommend this, if anything, just to see where the I Want You Back guy went almost 20 years
I
later.
don't
It's an
want you
interesting
back.
novelty.
I want you back is that's fucking
Oh,
that's
right.
that's what's his fucking name? The other
Uh,
trashy white R&B guy, Robin Thicke. That's
that's it. Yeah,
I was trying to find an angle for a Robin Thicke comparison at one point, but honestly, this guy looks more like the white R. Kelly. But I'm pleased to hear
Oh no.
I'm pleased to hear he put out a good album. That's such a
Yeah,
funny arc for him. I will
it
never
is.
listen to it probably, but I'm glad it
Nope.
exists.
Yeah, me
Or
too.
maybe I will. Maybe fuck it. Maybe I will, because this is the spirit of what we're doing, right? Is give
Yeah.
artists a chance, and you never know when something might come along from someone who's completely flatlined and really lift your expectations. And
Yeah.
so my first pick is going to be a little bit more on the controversial side, because a lot of people love this band. They're one of the most successful and famous bands in the world. They still tour successfully. They put out 2 albums last year that a lot of people
We've
listen to.
talked about them 2 times before.
Oh yes, absolutely. And it's kind of fun. In fact, this is the theme with both of the artists I've picked today. They are artists who I think have the majority of their career is music I cannot stand, but they are also artists who are punching bags. And so they're very easy to hate.
Mhm.
Now, I don't feel as much compunction about this first artist and hating on them because they have a lot of people who love them. But the artist is Red Hot Chili Peppers. And you might be thinking, okay, so what does Riley think is the one good Red Hot Chili Peppers album? Because this is really interesting, right? The idea that someone would like one and only one Red Hot Chili Peppers album and think the rest suck is, and I would admit, if you put that to me, in a vacuum, maybe a few years ago, I would have said, okay. I mean, because, up until a certain point, hearing the Red Hot Chili Peppers and discovering some of their albums, their bigger records like Blood Sugar Sex Magic and Californication and Stadium Arcadium, while I was a teenager and growing up, it all kind of blended together to me. And we did a 30th anniversary retrospective on Blood Sugar Sex Magic for our 1991 retrospective, an episode I'm really proud of because it was an album where I really tried to find the interesting and the high points, even though so much of it is unlistenable sludge. It's a very funny album. It has aspects of it that are fun to talk about, but I was really trying to find the most positive side for that record when it is in reality an album that gets worse every year older I get. It's an album I can't stand more and more. But the album they made right after it, well, a few years after it, the next album they made, 1995's One Hot Minute, is, I think, the best Red Hot Chili Peppers album by some margin. And I mean that in the sense that it is the only Red Hot Chili Peppers album I like. I mean that full-throatedly. Not that anyone's going to be terribly surprised by that. I don't like Californication. I think that album is actually, frankly, overrated and sounds terrible. I don't like, no one likes Stadium Arcadium. I don't even like By the Way, which a lot of people think is kind of like a low-key sleeper, better than you think album. But One Hot Minute works, and it works for one very specific reason. Anyone who's heard it will know what I'm about to say. Dave Navarro of Jane's Addiction joined the band because John Frusciante left after Blood Sugar Sex Magic. He was just on a cocaine mountain of his own, so much cocaine that even the Red Hot Chili Peppers couldn't deal for a period of time. And so they recruited Dave Navarro of Jane's Addiction. Now, Jane's Addiction are another trashy, tasteless band that is very easy to hate on. And I like Jane's Addiction a lot. Their first two albums, Nothing Shocking and Ritual de la Habitual, are albums that I probably wouldn't like as much if I hadn't heard them as a teenager, but I have this nostalgic attachment to them. I think Dave Navarro is an incredible guitarist, one of the best of the whole grunge era. And even though those are tasteless albums that, as the cliche goes, you could not make them today, they are, there's cancelable material all over them. I like Jane's Addiction. I've always had a fondness for them. And I think that part of that is that even as trashy as they are, the musicality is still really, really there. And there's more to it than the goofiness of Red Hot Chili Peppers kind of just peppy, bizarro vision of funk. And don't get me wrong, there are still aspects of classic Red Hot Chili Peppers that do weigh One Hot Minute down in certain parts. I think that the Walkabout song sucks ass, mostly because it's the closest, and Deep Kick isn't very good either, and those are really the closest to Falling Into Grace is okay, but those three are the kind of closest to the more Red Hot Chili Peppers sound, and they're the stuff I enjoy the least. But the vast majority of this album works really well. And it works well because it is dark. It is gritty. It is not Anthony Kiedis and co. attempting to make a silly, funny, peppy album about having sex and dick jokes and all that kind of shit. It is an album made in the throes of serious drug problems, intra-band disputes. It is notably an album that the band themselves have practically completely disowned, and they refuse to play any of the songs on this live, and have done for basically as long as the album existed. As soon as this album was done, Red Hot Chili Peppers were done with it and wanted to put it behind them as quickly as possible. And there's a smarmy, funny irony to that, because I think musically it is the most compelling and accomplished thing that they've ever put out. And it's not just because of Dave Navarro, although he is a huge part of it. His incredible guitar playing, his incredible guitar tones give so much weight and real kind of groove, and not that Flea, of course, doesn't have groove, but just this kind of darker density to the core of these arrangements than you'll get on basically any other Chili Peppers record. Now, I think Frusciante is a really creative and innovative and beloved guitarist for a lot of good reasons, but with the Red Hot Chili Peppers and their classic lineup, it's a little bit just too much. These four guys who all have this very sort of light funk, clunky, ugly approach to what they do, and it just doesn't work for me. But whereas when you have someone like Dave Navarro, who is bringing this real oomph and sort of like, Frusciante's maybe a more technically talented guitarist, but Navarro has more grit in the way he plays, and he does have a sense of funk and rhythm, of course he does, but he just brings this extra additional weight to these songs that really suits the subject matter as well. I think My Friends, one of the absolute best Chili Peppers songs by far, a genuinely dark and soulful track for Kiedis. Aeroplane, similarly, is some of the best lyricism that Kiedis has ever written. Warped, the opening track, is just a complete guitar freak out song. One Big Mob is an utterly bizarre 6-minute journey that in its midsection has Navarro using his guitar to approximate the sound of a baby crying. It's really strange shit. The second half of this record, though, from Tearjerker onward, like, gets even better, really leans into the darkness and ends in a really, really great place as well. I also think this is the best album to showcase Chad Smith's drum talent as well. Like, he's really going off on this album, and you really feel how brutal he can be as a player when he's really given the space for it. And this is the thing, like, Red Hot Chili Peppers, gentrified funk aesthetic is not only just completely not my thing, but also it can either feel incredibly wanky to listen to these performers just try and do these very staccato-y, just cheap sounding, chintzy affectations of funk. And also, it doesn't give you a real sense of the talent and diversity of the musicians in the band all that often. It very much coasts on a simple aesthetic, whereas everyone who's working on this album has to really push themselves, has to go out of their comfort zone, and the darkness of it really gives it a three-dimensionality that I think no other Chili Peppers record has. And I understand that a lot of people like Chili Peppers because they don't have that. Like Chili Peppers because they're very two-dimensional and easy to listen to, and a lot of their best songs are just focused around sheer hooks. And the best songs on here aren't really based around hooks. They're based around great lyricism and really dense guitar arrangements. And that's just not what a lot of people go to Chili Peppers for. But it for me, it is an absolute blessing. And One Hot Minute, I think it's an underrated album. It's an album that I think is desperately due for a reevaluation as well. A big part of the reason why I think it hasn't been reevaluated is because of how much the Peppers hate it and how much they've gone so far to bury it. I mean, people don't know the biggest songs and the singles from this album because the Peppers refuse to play them or even acknowledge them. And so, not all of it works. Flea himself has lead vocals on the bizarre interlude P, which is unlistenable. And this does not work in the slightest. But moments like that are very easy to overlook because they're few and far between and they don't take up much of the track list. I genuinely think that for the most part, this is a really strong album, frequently a great one. And it just gets better the more I come back to it. The more frequently I come back to it, the more I think about it in a vacuum, and the more I appreciate it for what it is, as opposed to thinking about it in the context of the Chili Peppers and how much I hate the rest of their music. It just stands alone on its own as a different, intriguing, and successful execution of the strengths of these musicians that they often shy away from in the pursuit of an aesthetic that I think is ill-fitted towards what they're actually good at, which is maybe a controversial statement. But I mean, I don't like the Chili Peppers. I know a lot of people don't like them, and a lot of people who don't like them still won't like this, but it really works for me. It finds a level that's so much more different, so much darker, so much uglier than the rest of their music, that it feels unintentionally revealing. And I can understand why the band might feel uncomfortable with that. But ultimately, it is something that gives this the true sheen of a great work of art. So I recommend revisiting it, checking it out, especially if you're not a Chili Peppers fan. It may be better than you're expecting or better than you're remembering if it's been a hot minute since you've heard it.
Ayo.
Your turn, Jake.
My second pick is gonna land me in some hot water with some certain people, and also I'm cheating a little bit with it, but fuck you, this exercise was hard. This particular artist is somebody that certainly does have a very big following, but has, I think it's fair to say, rapidly diminished over the course of the last decade or so because of their output. And that artist is Kid Cudi. And I think that I at least went out of my way here is because we said no debut records, and Man on the Moon is generally considered to be his best record. And on 50% of the days I would probably agree with that. He does have a mixtape for that for whatever's worth, so maybe I could cheat and kind of pick that. But I will go out on a limb for the Cudster here, and I will pick for this one Man on the Moon 2. Full titled The Legend of Mr. Rager. Which, yes, it is a bit of a cheat just because it is the very beginning of his career, and then it was, afterwards where he sort of fell off, so to speak. But it's not because of diminishing returns. If anything, it's because Kid Cudi tries to do too much. It's not really him losing his way. I think, if anything, that it's Kid Cudi's singular appeal, even to this day, is that he stayed true to himself the whole way through.
Absolutely.
And that's either something that you get along with or you don't. And I really like Man on the Moon. I think it's a bit of a bloated project, but I really like a lot of the songs on there. Make Her Say, Pursuit of Happiness, the one that features MGMT on there, is great. Day and Night. There's lots of great pop rap songs that are also really innovative. I think that kind of paved the way for a certain kind of psychedelic trap sound that wasn't as popular when that record came out. But Man on the Moon 2 is an album that I feel like a lot of people just sort of forget about, even though it is generally kind of well liked, but it's sort of, it gets lost in the shadow of just, its predecessor being the only good Kid Cudi album. But honestly, I think this album, for as much as it probably doesn't have the consistency of the first record, it kind of has higher highs for me. I think that there are songs on here like the Mary J. Blige featuring Don't Play This Song. Kanye West on Erase Me is amazing. Saint Vincent is on Maniac. There are lots of songs on here that have really great feature choices that are very unusual. That, I mean, Cudi makes work even better than he did before. I'd say that the MGMT feature comes close from the previous record, but here it feels like he's trying to synthesize a little bit more in terms of his vast kind of array of influences. But there's also songs like Mojo So Dope. There's songs like, I'm really fond of the very beloved single Mr. Rager. I think
That's an amazing
much
song.
as genuinely
That's top 3 Cudi
probably
songs.
I was gonna say probably his best song,
Yeah.
at least one of them.
Mhm.
But that's another song that, like, this to me just has the artistic high points that I would come to Kid Cudi for. And over the years has been the project of his that I haven't like revisited these albums a ton, but when I want to listen to a single song from them, I generally find myself listening to this one a little bit more. And I do think that this project's biggest problem, and the reason I can't really confidently say it's better than the first, is, again, the length. These albums don't need to be an hour long, but nonetheless, that is part of Kid Cudi's appeal, is that he's big, is that he compromises, or he doesn't make any compromises, and he just kind of lets his ideas, sometimes go way beyond the pale in terms of how tasteful they are, but still is committed to seeing himself through. And, there is a part of me that respects him being so singular after this. But then again, I have to also consider the fact that that singularity was in pursuit of albums like Indicud and Speed and Bullet to Heaven, which, those albums have accrued a lot of hate over the years, and I am not here to say play defense for them in any respect. I think Speed and Bullet to Heaven is an easy 1 out of 10 album that is deeply annoying and very misguided. But it is fascinating. It, as a cultural artifact, as this just unfiltered id project from Kid Cudi. It is a very strange record that, despite my rating for it, I couldn't in good conscience say that I hate it. And the same thing kind of goes for Indicud, even though I almost feel like there are some ways in which I think Indicud is almost worse than Speed and Bullet to Heaven, but there are also parts of it that are just genuinely kind of admirable in places.
I agree. I think that Indicud is a bad album that is also overhated and in its best moments a lot of fun. Like that song he did with Father John Misty on that album is legitimately really fucking good, and I will always have time. Even though it sucks, I will always have time for the 9-minute Michael Bolton song.
Bring your friends.
Bring your friends. Come on.
And he's got RZA on here. He's got Haim. He's got Kendrick Lamar on Solo Dolo Part 2, which is a great song for the record.
Yeah.
And you know, it's got its moments, but then there's like I think the real kind of nadir for Cudi with me is actually an album that's not well liked, but to me, Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying is just all of his least interesting sort of aspects boiled down into one release, and that's the only one that I really resent as a result of that. And you know, I'm not saying that, like, again, I really like and admire, for as flawed as I think the first two Man on the Moon albums are, I do respect them, and I do kind of don't want anything, like, they're messes, but I don't really necessarily think I'd want anything about them changed because they still feel so fundamentally Cudi. And I'm not saying that I want him to, you know, go and make Man on the Moon 3. Oh God, he made Man on the Moon 3. Shit.
We reviewed it.
We reviewed Man on the Moon 3. Son of a bitch.
It was mid.
But I was going to say, I'm not saying that I want him to make Man on the Moon 3. I guess Man on the Moon 4 in this instance.
If Man on the Moon 1 and 2 are so good,
why isn't there?
There's doesn't exist. That album was a complete snooze. Still waiting on the real Man on the Moon 3 any day now, right, guys?
When's Kendrick gonna drop Nation?
Like, I'm surprised going with Kid Cudi for the artist here. I'm surprised you didn't just pick Kids See Ghosts for the album, because you love that album.
I thought about possibly doing it when I was looking over my options for this, but the thing is that it's so tied up in both Kanye and the sort of the collaboration between the two of them that, like, I can't in good conscience solely dedicate that to Cudi, because that's Kanye in the midst of one of his most prolific and most interesting musically eras, and it feels like, I guess, dishonest to the sort of core of the exercise that we're undergoing here, is that it includes another person, but that does showcase a lot of what I think Cudi should be harnessing, and like the idea that you know, that album's like 20 minutes long, and that's sort of like the optimal use of Kid Cudi to me, is that if you know, condense everything down and then put it with someone who can anchor him, you can get incredible results like Kids See Ghosts, which is an album that, against my better judgment, I absolutely adore. Easily my favorite thing that Cudi has ever been a part of. But at the same time, it feels dishonest to Cudi's general artistic inclinations, because he's all about being this big personality and portraying these stories and including as many musical ideas as possible. It's, for as much as it is a collaboration, it feels like there is more Kanye in there than there is Cudi. But
I agree.
I see where you're coming from.
I agree with that. Yeah. I mean, Cudi is an interesting artist to choose for this exercise, because he kind of has a habit of getting in his own way a lot of the time, even in his best moments. But look, I always have a certain level of respect for how unflinchingly devoted to himself Kid Cudi is. He really is like he's the musical M. Night Shyamalan, right? Like, he is so he has his own aesthetic, and that aesthetic is what Kid Cudi wants to do and what Kid Cudi finds interesting at any given time, and everything else is completely tuned out. And he has a lot of his primary attribute, I would think, is this sole single-minded devotion to his own artistic integrity. And the irony of that is that it has turned off a lot of his fans when he dissed Kanye, or when he kind of separated himself from Kanye and said, I'm no longer associating with myself with him anymore. And a lot of people were like, oh, what the fuck's your problem, man? And now look where we are. And Kid Cudi's artistic integrity, though it has often been in the pursuit of music that we don't like, is the thing that keeps him an interesting personality, an interesting person, an interesting, part of the musical and hip hop landscape. So I'll always have time for everything he does, but I like that he has gone through this bizarre roller coaster ride of making two borderline great albums right at the beginning of his career, then completely dipping into the most tasteless and terrible things possible with the worst half of IndyCar and the entirety of Satellite Flight and Speed and Bullet to Heaven. And then kind of trending back upwards and finding this completely level middle ground in just the most milquetoast stuff possible. And that's where he currently occupies. But he's happy there. And good for him. My second pick today, and the last album we're going to talk about, I think is, and I'm proud of this pick because it is, I think, the best example of this exercise that either of us have come up with, because this is an artist that, again, to a certain degree, has become a punching bag. An artist who has been held up, I guess, as a symbol of everything that people dislike or find tasteless or find annoying about particular trends in, the post-Spotify era world of pop music, essentially. Yet this artist's, less agreeable aesthetic tendencies and decisions, and the way that this artist has positioned themselves in their previous music has certainly set them up to be disregarded casually, but has also meant that a lot of the actual core of their artistic personality and the things that make them interesting have been obscured, have been shrouded, or just have been plain invisible because of all of this surface level stuff, that makes their music less, easy to listen to or appealing from an aesthetic sensibility, and kind of shrouds their actual personality and makes them feel like they are, this empty vessel, essentially, that people are not able to really feel anything when they think about. And the artist that I'm going to talk about is Halsey. We know one of, first of all, shout out to a non-binary legend, a welcome member of that community who is now making music that espouses, so much of the energy that we want to see from non-binary artists. Just the level of kind of, complete disregard for how to present oneself appropriately, and just purely embracing that singular personality, that sense of idiosyncrasy that when you are non-binary, and I say this as a non-binary person, you want to instill deeply into all of the art that you create, because it's a huge part of who you are, that idea of separating yourself from clear binary distinctions or clear pigeonholes of particular patterns of presenting yourself or behaving. And Halsey's been an awesome part of the community, particularly for their most recent record, 2021's If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, which, there are a lot of discourse surrounding this. It was interesting because Halsey deliberately underplayed the promotion of this album. I don't think that they released any singles, or at least they were not particularly interested in promoting this album in any of the conventional ways. So, a lot of people didn't really even know that this album existed. It did not have the huge commercial push that their previous records, Manic and Badlands, had, and Hopeless Fountain Kingdom as well, that other one. And those albums, again, are so swamped by the huge singles that they're associated with that are, vapid songs, really, that don't have a lot to dig into, that don't really showcase a lot of who Halsey is, because their writing and the way that they present themselves is so swamped in their influences and the things that they are evoking. They literally have a song called New Americana, one of the biggest reasons why they're a punching bag, that is the whole thing about that is establishing their artistic personality and who they are through the lens of other figures of, contemporary music and of recent history and all that kind of thing. So Halsey has kind of come up not really knowing, or at least not in my view, giving a very clear and distinct portrait of who they are, just completely falling under the anonymous umbrella of vague influences that, Joy Division t-shirt music, basically. And I don't want to deny or rule out that there is good music on those records. I haven't listened to any of those three in full, although I have dipped in and out. And I certainly think that the record before If I Can't Have Love, I Won't Power, Manic, was an improvement on Halsey's earlier stuff.
Yeah, Manic's pretty good.
But this album, I liked it when it first came out. And I remember on the podcast, when we're talking about what we've been listening to, I remember shouting it out as saying, this record is really, really strong. I listened to it again today and I'm like, fuck, this is great. Like the one thing that music nerds kind of latched onto when this album came out was the fact that it's entirely produced by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. And that aspect of the production, their sound, is really integral to how the record sounds. And you can feel that. You can tell that these are songs that, these are instrumentals that are in large part composed by these figures. But there is always constant direction from Halsey. This is not simply Halsey leaning on other artists as a crutch to bolster her music or push it up. They are very clearly directing how they want this music to sound, how they need this album to sound in order for the songs to make sense. And it's a fantastic synthesis between subject matter and aesthetic from a sonic standpoint. This is a fantastic album. It's not just good for Halsey. This is a great record. I like it more each time I come back to it as well. There are stark and brittle and brutal moments, such as The Tradition early in the record, and You Asked for This as well, and Easier Than Lying. There are fantastic, pure, awesome, hooky pop songs like Girl Is a Gun.
Girl Is a Gun and Honey.
And the absolutely immortal I'm Not a Woman, I'm a God, which is my favorite song on this album and legitimately one of my favorite pop songs of the last few years. Just the raw industrial synth tones that remind me a lot of Depeche Mode, but also feel very much like Social Network, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo era, Reznor and Ross, with Halsey just completely going off over top of this beat. It's fucking fantastic. I love that shit. The more heartfelt moments as well, the moments where the electronic sheen is stripped back and it's even a more plaintive acoustic moment like Darling, even those moments work because Halsey has more command of what they're trying to communicate and the kind of artistic personality they're trying to put forward and the emotions that they're trying to communicate through their lyricism, that it works better than it ever has before. I just thoroughly enjoy this album from front to back. I think it's fantastic. And it feels as though Halsey has found a way of synthesizing the genuinely interesting artistic ideas and explorations of their personality and of their perspective that they've been trying to hone across their career with an aesthetic that bolsters that and fully complements it to the absolute maximum extent. I love this album and I love it more each time I come back to it. And I think that it truly is a showcase of how an artist who has genuine talent and has a genuine vision, but can get so bogged down and not quite finding a way to realize that in a unique and idiosyncratic fashion. Ultimately, all of their creative impulses coalescing and finally finding a vision that means they can come through stronger than they ever have before as well. And it's maybe meaningful that I'm pretty sure this was the first album Halsey put out after coming out as non-binary as well. So it feels as though it is an assertion of personality and of self-actualization as well that adds this additional element to it that really makes it feel so real and so fulsome. Another album I thought of putting in this spot as well, but ultimately feels a little bit more redundant because it's kind of a similar exercise to this, is Kesha's Rainbow, which is an album I love dearly.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. But also I think that Kesha's earlier music is maybe, even if it doesn't make for very many great albums, is maybe a little bit overhated and maybe it has aged a little bit better than people think it has. And also, I think the album that Kesha put out after Rainbow, High Road, wasn't great, but also did have some good moments on it too. So another artist I thought about putting in this spot was Katy Perry with Teenage Dream. But then I revisited that album and realized that it's literally just the first 4 songs that are good and the rest of it completely sucks.
I was also potentially going to pick that, but then I remembered I have that up for a record club later this year. Another album I actually thought about putting here as well is something that very much I saw your pick and then decided that this would be ultimately redundant, but I know it's not exactly an album that's seen differently than their others, but it's from another non-binary pop star, that being Demi Lovato. Their album Confident, which is the album that Cool for the Summer is on. That's what most people know it from, which I think is a really solid pop album. Honestly, it has more than enough in common with an album like If I Can't Have Love or I Want Power, but that one is it's a more defined pivot, I think, that just makes it a little bit more interesting to examine. And also, I love that Halsey makes songs as unapologetically queer, something like Honey. It's just like it really does actually like mean something beyond being like cool once you do have that sort of declaration of identity and purpose. And also the incredibly striking album cover that it has just has all of this kind of pomp and circumstance that makes it really feel like it holds a lot of weight.
Absolutely. So yeah, I would say again, because of the lack of promotion, a lot of people overlook this, or they maybe listened to it once and chucked it aside as not being as crazy off the wall as maybe they might have wanted from the proposition. But genuinely, give this a chance.
It's
Don't
great.
go into it wanting a Nine Inch Nails record. Go into it wanting to hear Halsey's find a vision for what they want to express at this new stage of their life. And I think you will appreciate it through that framework better. And it's also fairer to the artist as well. It is their work and it's fantastic. So that brings us to the end of our discussion today of great albums from artists we don't usually like. And, this was, as Jake said, it was kind of a hard exercise to figure this out because we generally, when we find an artist and we know that we don't like an artist, we generally are put off from digging into the weeds to maybe find the hidden gems. But maybe the point of this exercise is to maybe make an effort to do that more often and make an effort to try and find something that you might not normally check out or an artist you don't normally like and see where it works. So let us know at home what you think are artists are examples of great records or records that work from artists that typically just bounce off you. We want to hear your examples, want to hear your thoughts in the comments below because this is a really interesting topic with a lot of potential. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing if you haven't already. Both those things help us a lot. If you want to go above and beyond and support us directly for just $1 a month, you can hit the join button, become a member of the Jams and Tea family, get your name in the title crawl of all of these videos. Plus, if you want to recommend us some music to listen to, your recommendation will go to the top of the pile. Until next time though, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, electronic arts, challenge everything.